Nobody in Cleveland wants to admit this yet, but what just happened might be the most important move the Browns have made in years. And it's not because they hired a new head coach. It's because of why they hired him. On the surface, it looks like a normal coaching change. Another franchise trying to reset. Another front office talking about culture, leadership, and the future. But if you look a little closer, this wasn't about fixing the Browns. This was about committing to one player. Because Todd Monken didn't walk into Cleveland randomly. He didn't take this job just because it was available. And he definitely didn't leave other opportunities on the table just to see what happens. This hire came with a plan. A very specific plan. And at the center of that plan is ShedeurSanders. That's what makes this situation different from every other rebuild we've seen. Most teams hire a coach first and then go searching for a quarterback. Cleveland just did the opposite. They found their quarterback and then went shopping for the exact coach who could build around him. And here's the part that should make the rest of the league nervous. Todd Monken has a track record of walking into unstable situations and turning quarterbacks into stars. He did it in college. He did it in the NFL. And every time it followed the same pattern. Step 1, identify the quarterback. Step 2, build the system around him. Step 3, fix whatever is holding him back. So when Monken chose Cleveland, people thought it was about the roster, or the defense, or the front office. But the truth is, this decision makes way more sense when you stop looking at the Browns and start looking at Shedeur. Because Shedeur is in a strange position right now. Half the internet thinks he's already a future star. The other half thinks he's overhyped and protected by his name. His rookie season didn't silence the critics. It gave them more ammo, sacks, pressure, forced throws, inconsistent numbers. On paper, it looked like just another young quarterback struggling to adjust. But behind the scenes, a different story has been circulating. Reports claim teams around the league don't see Shedeur as the problem. They see the situation around him as the problem. The protection, the scheme, the lack of stability. And apparently, one of the people who believed that the most was Todd Monken. Which raises a dangerous question. What if Shedeur's struggles weren't proof that he can't be elite, but proof that he's never actually been set up to succeed? Because if Monken really came to Cleveland with Shedeur in mind, that means this wasn't a rebuild. This was a correction, a second chance, a controlled environment designed to answer one thing once and for all. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay locked in on all the latest NFL drama, make sure you hit that like button. It helps the video reach more people who love this content just like you. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another update, reaction, or storyline as it unfolds in real time. I also want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about ShedeurSanders' performance and the Browns' collapse? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about it. And don't forget to share this video with friends who follow the NFL. Your support truly keeps the channel moving forward. Is ShedeurSanders actually a franchise quarterback, or has the league been wrong about him the entire time? And the moves Cleveland is making right now suggest they already think they know the answer. The reason this hire feels different is because it doesn't follow the normal NFL script. Usually, when a team brings in a new head coach, it's about resetting the culture, fixing the locker room, or finding someone who can do a little bit of everything. It's vague. It's safe. And most of the time, it means the franchise still doesn't really know what it wants. But that's not what happened in Cleveland. The Browns didn't hire Todd Monken to stabilize the building. They didn't hire him to see what he can do. They hired him because of what he's already done, and more importantly, because of who he's done it with. Todd Monken isn't a generalist. He's not one of those coaches who tries to be good at defense, special teams, and offense all at once. His entire reputation is built on one thing: quarterbacks. Wherever Monken goes, the offense becomes the priority and the quarterback becomes the centerpiece. Not the running game, not the defense, the quarterback. That alone tells you this wasn't a random choice. If Cleveland just wanted experience, there were safer options. If they wanted continuity, they could have promoted from within. If they wanted innovation, they could have gone younger. But instead, They chose a coach whose career is defined by building systems around specific QBs and tailoring offenses to fit their exact strengths. That's a very intentional profile. Monken's history shows a clear pattern. At Georgia, he took talented quarterbacks and put them in schemes that simplified reads, sped up decision-making, and let them play fast without overthinking. At Baltimore, he walked into a situation where Lamar Jackson was already elite, but inconsistent within the structure of the offense. And what did Monken do? He didn't try to change Lamar. He changed the system around him. The result was one of the most efficient offenses in football, and Lamar playing at an MVP level again. So when Cleveland picked Monken, they weren't just hearing a coach. They were choosing a philosophy, a belief system, a blueprint that says, we don't adapt our quarterback to the system, we adapt the system to the quarterback. And that's what makes this move feel less like a coaching hire and more like a franchise decision. Because teams that aren't sure about their quarterback don't hire Todd Monken. They hire CEO-type coaches, motivators, culture guys, defensive minds who want balance. But teams that are sure about their quarterback go and find someone whose entire job is maximizing that position. Cleveland skipped the uncertainty phase. They didn't say, let's find a coach and figure out the QB later. They said, we know who the QB is, now let's find the perfect coach for him. That's backwards compared to most rebuilds, and that's why this hire feels different. This wasn't about fixing Cleveland. It was about unlocking someone specific inside Cleveland. And once you realize that, the next question becomes unavoidable. Who exactly was this hire really for? Here, where the story starts getting interesting, because once you look past the press conferences and official statements, a different narrative begins to surface. One that hasn't been confirmed, but has been circulating quietly across league insiders and online circles for months. Rumors suggest Todd Monken didn't just end up in Cleveland. He chose Cleveland, and not because of the weather, the market, or even the roster. According to reports floating around the league, Monken had multiple opportunities lined up. Teams like the Giants were allegedly pushing hard to bring him in. Other franchises with young quarterbacks were reportedly interested too. But somehow, the job he took was the one where ShedeurSanders was already in place. That's where people started connecting dots. Because Shedeur isn't just another young QB. He's one of the most talked about quarterbacks of his generation, not just for his play, but for the attention around him. The hype, the criticism, the debates. Half the league sees star potential. The other half sees a question mark. And that kind of player attracts a very specific type of coach. A coach who wants a project. A coach who wants a challenge. A coach who wants to be the one who proves everyone wrong. And that's exactly the type of reputation Monken has built. There's been buzz for a while now that Monken was fascinated by Shedeur's skill set. The pocket presence, the timing, the arm talent, the way he processes defenses when he actually has time. Some reports even claim Monken had been studying Shedeur's film long before this job ever became available, especially the games where the protection broke down but the flashes still showed up. Nothing about that is official, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Monken leaves a stable situation, turns down other interest, walks straight into a franchise with a controversial young quarterback who needs development, structure, and belief. That's not coincidence, that's alignment. And then there's another layer people rarely talk about. For years, Shedeur has been labeled as too confident, too flashy, or too protected. But inside NFL circles, the conversation has been different. Reports claim several teams believe Shedeur is actually one of the most mentally advanced young quarterbacks they've evaluated. High football IQ, strong work ethic, obsessive about film. The type of player who thrives in a complex offensive system, not a simplified one. That matters, because Monken doesn't run basic systems. He runs detailed systems, option routes, timing concepts, adjustments at the line, offenses that only work if the quarterback can think at a high level. So if Monken truly wanted Shedeur, it makes sense. This is the kind of quarterback he builds around. Not just physically talented, but mentally wired to handle pressure, responsibility, and control of the offense. Which is why the Cleveland move suddenly looks less like luck and more like design. Because if Monken saw Shedeur as raw but fixable, talented but misused, then Cleveland wasn't a risk. It was an opportunity. An opportunity to take one of the most polarizing young quarterbacks in football and turn him into the ultimate "I told you so" story. And if that's really what's happening, then this hire wasn't about Cleveland finding a coach. It was about a coach finding his quarterback. If there was still any doubt about what Todd Monken's real priorities were, it disappeared the moment he made his first move. Because when most new head coaches take over a franchise, they start by making a splash. They bring in a high-profile coordinator. They announce a new defensive philosophy. They try to reshape the identity of the team in one big headline. Monken didn't do any of that. His first hire wasn't flashy. It wasn't trendy. It didn't dominate sports shows, but it told the entire story if you knew what to look for. He hired an offensive line coach. And not just any offensive line coach, George Wahop, a name that doesn't mean much to casual fans, but carries serious weight inside NFL circles. Wahop has been coaching offensive lines in the league since the mid-90s. That's nearly 3 decades of experience protecting quarterbacks, fixing broken fronts, and turning weak units into functional ones. That alone is unusual. Most head coaches start by worrying about play design. Monken started by worrying about protection. Which raises a simple but powerful question. Why would your very first move be about keeping your quarterback upright, unless your entire plan revolves around that quarterback? Because this wasn't a long-term hire. This wasn't a "we'll get to it later" move. This was day one, priority one, the foundation. And the timing makes it even more revealing. One of the biggest criticisms surrounding ShedeurSanders over the past year hasn't been his arm, or his decision-making, or his leadership. It's been the same issue everywhere he's played: pressure, hits, sacks, constant chaos in the pocket. So what does Monken do? He doesn't talk about competition at quarterback. He doesn't bring in another passer. He doesn't hedge his bets. He hires the guy whose entire career is built around fixing exactly that problem. And here, where it gets even more interesting. Wahop isn't just experienced, he's familiar. He worked with Monken before. They already know each other's systems, terminology, and expectations. That means this wasn't a rushed decision. This wasn't random. This was planned. Which makes the hire feel less like staffing and more like strategy. Monken didn't say it out loud, but the message was clear. We're not replacing the quarterback. We're replacing the environment around him. That's a massive difference. Because teams that aren't confident in their QB start by looking for alternatives, draft prospects, free agents, insurance policies, but teams that believe in their QB start by fixing the things that made him struggle. And protection is the first thing you fix. The offensive line determines everything. How long the QB has to read the field, whether he can step into throws, whether he's forced into bad decisions, whether he plays free or plays scared. Monken knows that. Wahop knows that. And the fact that this was the very first hire tells you exactly where this rebuild is headed. Not toward a new quarterback. Toward giving ShedeurSanders the first real chance he's ever had to actually play the position the way it's supposed to be played. And once that clicked, the entire hire started making sense. For most people, ShedeurSanders' rookie season can be summed up in one word: inconsistent. The numbers didn't jump off the screen. The highlight reels were mixed with lowlights, and every week social media seemed to find a new clip to argue about. Bad throw here, forced pass there, another sack, another hit. On the surface, it looked like the same story we've seen 100 times before. Talented young quarterback enters the league. The hype is big. The reality hits harder. And suddenly the narrative shifts from future star to maybe he's not ready. But that version of the story leaves out the most important detail. Shedeur wasn't struggling because he couldn't read defenses. He wasn't struggling because he didn't understand the system. And he definitely wasn't struggling because he lacked confidence. He was struggling because he rarely had time to do anything. Pressure was the constant, not just sometimes, almost every drop back. Reports claim Shedeur was among the most pressured quarterbacks in his class. The pocket collapsed early. The edges leaked. The interior broke down. And when a quarterback is forced to move before routes even develop, the entire offense falls apart. That changes how you play the position. You stop trusting timing. You stop stepping into throws. You start rushing decisions that should be calm. Even the best quarterbacks in the league struggle under those conditions. So for a young quarterback still adjusting to NFL speed, it becomes survival mode. And that's exactly how Shedeur played. Not reckless, not careless, defensive. He wasn't trying to be perfect. He was trying to stay upright. Which explains a lot of the things critics used against him. The rushed passes, the interceptions, the moments where he looked hesitant. Those weren't confidence issues. They were protection issues. It's the same pattern that followed him earlier in his career, too. At Colorado, the narrative was similar. Big arm, high potential, but constantly under pressure, constantly scrambling, constantly improvising. The flashes were there, but the environment never let him settle into a rhythm. So by the time he reached the league, Shedeur had already developed habits built around chaos. Move early, release fast, expect pressure even when it's not there. And that's not how pocket quarterbacks are supposed to play. Pocket quarterbacks need stability, clean pockets, time to let routes unfold, the ability to scan the field without defenders in their face after 2 seconds. That's where the disconnect happened. People were judging Shedeur as if he was being given ideal conditions, when in reality, he was playing one of the hardest versions of the position. Which is why Monken's reaction matters so much. Instead of saying Shedeur needs competition, or needs to be replaced, or needs to simplify his game, Monken addressed the one thing that affects everything else. The protection. Because once a quarterback feels safe in the pocket, everything changes. The footwork improves, the accuracy jumps, the decision-making slows down in a good way. The game stops feeling like a fight and starts feeling like chess. And if Shedeur finally gets that environment for the first time in his career, then the season everyone labeled as disappointing might end up being the most misunderstood year of his entire story. The reason people are taking this situation seriously isn't just because of Shedeur. It's because of who's now in charge of developing him. Todd Monken isn't an unproven coordinator experimenting with a young quarterback. He's one of the few coaches in football whose entire career is built on quarterback transformation. Wherever Monken goes, the same pattern shows up. He identifies what a quarterback does best. He removes what they struggle with. And then he builds a system that makes the position easier, not harder. At Georgia, Monken took college quarterbacks and put them in pro-style systems that emphasized timing, spacing, and quick reads. His offenses weren't about trick plays or gimmicks. They were about structure, letting the quarterback control the game instead of reacting to it. That approach helped Georgia dominate at the highest level and produce some of the most efficient passing attacks in college football. Then came Baltimore. When Monken arrived with the Ravens, Lamar Jackson was already elite, but the offense wasn't fully optimized around him. Lamar was still being asked to carry too much improvisation, too many broken plays, too much reliance on athleticism. Monken changed that. He streamlined the system, introduced more defined progressions, balanced the run-pass concepts, and suddenly Lamar wasn't just a highlight machine. He was running one of the most efficient offenses in the league. The result was MVP-level play and a version of Lamar that looked calmer, sharper, and more in control than ever before. That's the key detail. Monken doesn't just make quarterbacks better statistically. He makes them better mentally. He slows the game down for them. That's exactly what Shedeur needs. Because Shedeur's strengths align perfectly with the kind of quarterbacks Monken thrives with. He's a rhythm passer, a timing-based thrower, Someone who processes coverage well when he's not under immediate pressure. He's not a backyard football player. He's a system quarterback in the best sense of the word. And Monken is a system architect. That combination is rare. Most young quarterbacks are thrown into messy situations with experimental play calling and inconsistent coaching. They're asked to figure things out on the fly, to learn new systems every year, to adapt without structure. Monken does the opposite. He gives quarterbacks clarity, defined roles, clear reads, predictable concepts, a framework they can trust. And the results speak for themselves. Quarterbacks under Monken don't just improve, they stabilize. Their mechanics get cleaner. Their decision-making sharpens. Their confidence grows because the offense actually makes sense. Which is why analysts and former players have reacted so strongly to this hire. They're not just praising Monken as a coach. They're recognizing a pattern. When Todd Monken gets his hands on a quarterback, that quarterback usually takes a leap. Not because of hype. Not because of marketing, but because the environment finally matches the talent. So if Monken sees something in Shedeur worth building around, it's not optimism. It's evaluation, film study, experience. He's done this before. He knows what a struggling quarterback looks like. And he knows what a fixable one looks like. And the fact that he chose Shedeur as his next project might be the strongest signal, yet that this story is just getting started. What makes this situation even bigger than the Browns is the fact that Cleveland wasn't the only team watching Todd Monken. They just happened to be the team that moved first. And according to rumors circulating around league insiders, some franchises are already realizing they might have made a costly mistake. The New York Giants are at the center of that conversation. Reports suggest the Giants were aggressively interested in Monken. They've been searching for offensive stability for years, cycling through systems, coordinators, and quarterbacks without ever finding real consistency. A coach like Monken, experienced, QB-focused, and proven, must have been a perfect fit for a team still trying to figure out its offensive identity. But Cleveland got there first. And that's why some analysts are quietly calling this a massive loss for the Giants. Not because Monken is some miracle worker, but because of what he represents in the current NFL landscape. He represents clarity. Most teams are stuck in between phases, not rebuilding, not contending, just existing. They don't know if their quarterback is the answer, so they hesitate. They don't know if their coach is the problem, so they delay. And that indecision keeps them average. Cleveland didn't hesitate. They picked a side. They looked at ShedeurSanders and said, "This is our guy." Then they looked for the best possible coach to maximize him, not the most popular coach, not the youngest coach, the most relevant coach for their situation. That's what other teams failed to do. The Giants, for example, are still stuck in evaluation mode, still unsure if they should draft, trade, or develop. Still juggling short-term fixes instead of committing to a long-term plan. And when a team lives in that space too long, opportunities slip away. Not just players. Coaches. Because coaches like Monken don't stay available for long. They move when they see a project they believe in, a quarterback they can shape, a situation where their philosophy actually fits. And apparently, Cleveland checked all those boxes before anyone else did. That's why this feels less like Cleveland, winning, a coach, and more like other teams missing one. Missing a chance to build a real offensive identity instead of chasing temporary solutions. And it's not just the Giants. There are several franchises right now with young quarterbacks, unstable offenses, and coaching uncertainty. Teams that could have used exactly what Monken brings: structure, development, stability. But they waited. Cleveland didn't. They moved decisively, built around a single vision, and locked in a coach who aligns perfectly with their quarterback's skill set. That's a rare level of organizational alignment in the NFL. And history shows that when a team finally gets the coach-QB pairing right, everything changes. Not overnight, not instantly, but direction changes, momentum changes. the franchise stops drifting. Which is why, 2 or 3 years from now, this hire might not be remembered as the day Cleveland found a coach. It might be remembered as the day several other teams realized they let the wrong one slip away. When you step back and look at everything Cleveland has done, the picture becomes clear. This was never just a coaching change. It was a statement, a declaration about direction, identity, and belief. The Browns didn't just hire Todd Monken to fix what was broken. They hired him to commit to what they think is already right. ShedeurSanders. That's the real headline behind all of this. Not the press conferences, not the contract details, not even the staff changes. The headline is that Cleveland has officially chosen a quarterback to build around, and they're no longer pretending to be unsure about it. In the NFL, that kind of commitment is rare. Most teams live in doubt. They hedge their bets. They talk about competition. They keep their options open in case things go wrong. But Cleveland did the opposite. They doubled down. They looked at Shedeur's struggles and didn't see a liability, they saw an opportunity. An opportunity to fix the environment instead of replacing the player. That's what makes this different from the usual rebuild. This isn't about starting over. It's about correcting the conditions. Protection instead of pressure. Structure instead of chaos. Development instead of survival. And Todd Monken is the embodiment of that philosophy. His entire career has been about taking quarterbacks who are misunderstood, misused, or underoptimized, and putting them in systems that finally make sense. Systems that let them think clearly, play freely, and show what they can actually do when the game slows down. Which means Shedeur is no longer just trying to survive the league. He's being prepared to run an offense. That's a massive shift. Because once a quarterback stops playing scared and starts playing in control, everything changes. The stats change. The perception changes. The conversations change. The same people who questioned him suddenly start rewriting the narrative. And that's why this moment feels bigger than Cleveland. If this works, if Shedeur takes the leap people inside the league believe he can, then this becomes one of those turning points everyone looks back on. The moment a franchise stopped chasing solutions and finally committed to one. Not because it was safe, but because it was bold. So the real question isn't whether Todd Monken is a good coach, or whether the Browns made the right hire. The real question is whether the league has underestimated ShedeurSanders this entire time. Because if this new system unlocks what's been buried under pressure, instability, and bad protection, then this won't be remembered as a rebuild. It'll be remembered as the start of something the rest of the NFL didn't see coming.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.